We are in November 2025. The last pages of the calendar begin to weigh heavily. It's that silent period between the rush of the end of the year and the internal judgment that accumulates in every thought. Social media is already starting to display the first year in review posts. Feeds are filled with achievements, fresh starts, and victories narrated with golden filters. And for many, an uncomfortable question arises, almost whispered in the mind. And me? What did I do this year? If you feel that 2025 slipped through your fingers, that your plans were left half-finished or didn't even make it off the paper, this video is a mirror. Not one that shows what you have been, but one that reveals what you can become. Because the truth is that the feeling of failure you carry now is not necessarily a reflection of reality. It may just be a reflection of a mindset, an invisible mental framework that distorts your perception of progress and potential. Carol Dweck, a psychologist and researcher at Stanford, dedicated her life to studying what separates people who bounce back from difficult years from those who sink into guilt, self-criticism, and silent resignation. And her discovery is simple, yet brutally revealing. What defines your future is not how much you failed, but how you interpret that failure. According to Dweck, there are two types of mindsets: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And this subtle difference is what determines whether you end a year like 2025 feeling like a failure, or a learner about to take the next leap. The fixed mindset whispers that nothing will change, that if you haven't succeeded by now, you won't succeed anymore. It turns mistakes into identity. I am a failure. It seeks blame, feeds shame, paralyzes. On the other hand, the growth mindset asks completely different questions. It asks, what did 2025 try to teach me? What strategies didn't work? What can I do differently now that I know this? For those who adopt this mindset, a difficult year is not a graveyard of dreams. It's a mine of data, lessons, and invisible preparation for something greater. This video is not motivational. It is an intervention, a provocation, a push for you to stop interpreting your year as a report of failures and start seeing everything it revealed about who you are. And most importantly, who you can still become. You are still in control. November is not the end. There is still time. Time to reflect honestly, reclaim your narrative, and transform what seemed like a failure into a turning point. And if you are watching this, you have already taken the first step. You refuse to end another year feeling smaller than you truly are. Let's understand together how to rewrite 2025, starting now. Imagine a distorted lens that you don't even realize you're wearing. This lens doesn't change reality. It changes the way you interpret it. A challenge becomes a threat. A mistake becomes humiliation. A failed attempt becomes evidence that you were never good enough. This lens has a name: fixed mindset. And it's exactly this that makes so many people end the year with a suffocating sense of failure, even when, objectively, they faced obstacles that anyone would consider normal. Carol Dweck describes the fixed mindset as a cognitive trap that arises from the belief that your qualities are immutable. If you believe that intelligence, discipline, creativity, or resilience are fixed traits, then every bad outcome turns into an identity sentence. In other words, you stop analyzing what happened and start concluding, I am the problem. This type of thinking is subtle, sneaky, and deeply self-destructive. When a goal is not achieved, the fixed mind doesn't ask, what can I learn from this? But rather, why am I so useless? When a project fails, it doesn't evaluate the strategy, but judges its own essence. I will never be like others. These are questions that seek no answers, only reinforce emotional punishment. And what is even more dangerous, the fixed mindset paralyzes. By turning failures into permanent diagnoses, it robs the motivation to try again. After all, Why persist if every unsuccessful attempt only confirms that you are not good enough? The result is stagnation. Entire years are lived in a state of psychological defense, where the main goal is not to grow. It is to avoid new evidence that you are not enough. Dweck observed this in hundreds of studies, but also in the daily lives of ordinary people. Students who give up after a bad grade, professionals who sabotage their own careers for fear of appearing incompetent, adults who abandon old dreams because they believe they should have already succeeded. It is a mentality of continuous judgment, where every failure is treated as a personal failure, not as a natural part of the development process. But here is the central point. The fixed mindset does not reflect reality. It reflects a conditioned interpretation, often learned in childhood, reinforced by a performance culture, and fed by constant comparisons. And as long as this lens is not questioned, it will continue to filter every moment of your life, especially the most difficult ones, as proof of defeat. Therefore, before moving forward, take a pause and reflect. What narratives did you construct in 2025? How many times did you conclude that a mistake defined you? How many opportunities did you not even try, out of fear of seeing yourself once again as incapable? These questions are the starting point for the turnaround. Because there is another way to see all of this, a different type of mindset that does not erase failures, but transforms them into fuel. In the next section, we will dive into this second path, the one that separates those who sink into self-criticism from those who reinvent themselves after a difficult year. And perhaps for the first time, you will discover that what you called failure was just the beginning of your deeper formation. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Now imagine another lens, one that, instead of interpreting failures as verdicts, sees them as data. A lens that doesn't ask, what's wrong with me, but rather, what can I do differently? This is the perspective of a growth mindset, the direct antidote to the paralysis of failure. And when you understand the depth of this mentality, what once seemed like the end of a line reveals itself, in fact, as the true beginning. The growth mindset, according to Carol Dweck, stems from a powerful belief that our abilities, intelligence, and capacities are not fixed traits, they are developable. And this changes absolutely everything. Because if you can evolve, then every obstacle becomes a laboratory, every mistake a source of data, every failure a concrete clue about where and how to adjust the course. This mentality is not naive. It does not deny the pain, nor does it pretend to be empty optimism. The growth mindset faces the same problems as the fixed mindset, but responds in a radically different way. In the face of an unmet goal, it asks, was this approach the best possible? What can I try now based on what I've learned? When confronted with an unexpected result, it investigates, where is the bottleneck? Lack of skill, inefficient strategy, or lack of support? The difference lies not in the pain, but in what you do with it. And here comes an essential point. The quality of the questions you ask yourself defines the direction of your life. Destructive questions like, why am I so incompetent, generate answers that feed guilt and shame. Constructive questions like, what did 2025 try to teach me? Open space for resilience, focus, and action. In practice, the growth mindset transforms the year 2025 into a field of intensive learning. Not because everything went right, but precisely because a lot went wrong. And this is the secret that so many people have yet to realize. Difficult years are almost always the richest in terms of psychological development, if you know how to explore them. And that is exactly what Carol Dweck proposes, to use negative experiences as raw material for reconstruction. For her, true failure is not making mistakes, falling behind on goals. True failure is not extracting anything from it. It is going through an entire year without documenting the learnings, without rethinking strategies, without transforming stumbles into adjustments. This is the only type of failure that truly destroys, failure without awareness. And perhaps the most important question now is, how to do this in practice? How to transform what you experienced in 2025 into real insight, into concrete strategy, into an action plan for 2026. This is where Dweck's work stops being just a powerful theory and becomes a practical process of reframing. In the next section, we will explore a three-step method to reinterpret everything you experienced this year, a process that can turn this lost year into the most solid foundation for your next leap. Now that we understand the transformative power of a growth mindset, it's time to go beyond theory. Because in the end, knowing that your mindset influences your perception is not enough. You need concrete tools to reframe what you experienced in 2025. This is exactly where Carol Dweck delivers one of the most valuable legacies of her research, a practical, straightforward, and brutally honest process to reconstruct the narrative of a year that, at first glance, seems to have been a failure. The first step of this process is the honest audit of 2025. Here, there is no room for denial or fantasy. You will look at the goals you set and did not achieve. You will confront head-on what was left behind. But not to blame yourself, rather to investigate. Next to each failed goal, write down 3 fundamental questions. What did I learn from trying this? What unexpected obstacles did I face? What assumptions did I have that turned out to be wrong? This exercise is an extraction of wisdom. You are not performing an autopsy on failure. You are mining the raw data that failure provided. You are separating emotion from information. And more than anything, you are training your brain to interpret setbacks as opportunities for strategic refinement. The second step is identifying invisible wins. This part is counterintuitive, but essential. Carol Dweck discovered that, in difficult years, many of the greatest achievements do not show up in traditional metrics. They do not become year-in-review posts, but they are real achievements, and sometimes more important than those you can count. Ask yourself, what skills did I develop without realizing it? What kind of resilience did I need to build to get through the tough months? What kind of pain forced me to mature? What relationships were tested and strengthened? You may not have launched that project, but you learned to handle rejection. You may not have changed careers, but you faced your first job interviews in years. You may not have achieved perfect discipline, but you created small self-care habits that once seemed impossible. All of this counts. All of this is psychological capital, but it only becomes useful if recognized. The third step is the iterative strategy for 2026. Now that you have in hand what you learned and what you quietly built, it's time to revisit the unmet goals and redesign them. But with a new type of mindset. How would I do this now, with what I know today? What smaller, more sustainable step can I take? What external support can I seek? You are not repeating the previous attempt. You are prototyping a new version. And here lies the strength of the growth mindset. It does not demand perfection. It demands progression. It does not idealize major turnarounds. It values small iterations. Repeating the same mistakes is part of a fixed mindset. Adjusting movements based on what has been learned, that is evolution. This 3-step process is what separates those who go through a difficult year and carry only frustration from those who turn the same year into a launching pad. Because in the end, the question is not what went wrong, but rather, what am I going to do with what went wrong? And the answer to that question begins with action, even if imperfect, even if small. And that is exactly what we will talk about next, because the growth mindset does not only exist on a mental level, it manifests in daily practices, in simple yet powerful behaviors that you can apply right now still in 2025. In the next section, you will discover 4 techniques validated by Dweck that serve as tools to reprogram your perception of failure and start building 2026 even before the year ends. Having a growth mindset is an excellent starting point, but if that mindset does not translate into concrete action, it becomes just a beautiful idea, inspiring, yes, but sterile. Carol Dweck understood this early on. For a change in perspective to truly transform someone's life, it needs to be incorporated into visible, repeatable, and deliberate practices. And that is exactly what she proposed by developing techniques that not only adjust the way we think about failure, but also train us day by day to interpret our experiences with more emotional intelligence, self-compassion, and strategy. The first of these is the yet reframe technique. Instead of saying, "I failed to achieve goal X," you start saying, "I haven't achieved goal X yet." It may seem subtle, but this small linguistic change completely reprograms the belief system. "Not yet" implies that you are making progress, that the process is not over, and that the mistake is not an end. It is a step. But the real magic happens when you add the learning. "I haven't achieved goal X yet, but I found out that I need to adjust my morning routine and reduce distractions." The structure is simple but powerful. Not yet plus extracted learning. With this, you transform what seemed like a final failure into a bridge for a new attempt, with more intelligence. The second tool is the failure resume, a resume of failures. In it, you list not the achievements, but the mistakes and setbacks that marked your year. And next to each one, you write, "What did I learn from this? How did this strengthen me? What skill emerged from this experience?" This practice directly challenges the idea that failures are things to hide or forget. Instead, you document them as part of your building process. And by doing this, something extraordinary happens. You begin to realize that 2025 was not a lost year. It was a year of experimentation, of tests, of painful discoveries that no course or book could have taught you. The third technique is called Prototype 2026. The logic here is simple. You don't have to wait until January to start living the improved version of yourself. In fact, if you are waiting for a turn of the year to change, you are perpetuating the same cycle of a fixed mindset. The cycle of procrastination masked as planning. Prototype 2026 means taking the habits, goals, and projects you want to execute in the next year and testing minimal versions of them now, still in November or December. Want to write a book? Write a paragraph a day. Want to start a business? Test an idea with 5 people. Want to change your routine? Adjust your bedtime for a week. Start small, but start now. Growth does not respect the calendar. The fourth and final technique is the concept of growth partnerships. Here, Dweck challenges us to transform envy into insight. Think of someone who has achieved what you want. Instead of just admiring them or feeling inferior, send a direct message. Ask for 15 minutes of that person's time. Make a specific question. What was the most effective strategy you used to deal with something or someone? People with a fixed mindset avoid this type of contact because they believe that another's success diminishes them. People with a growth mindset transform others' success into spontaneous mentorship. This simple action can shorten years from your journey, if you have the courage to take the first step. These 4 techniques are not motivational tricks. They are ways to shape your behavior based on a new mental framework. They are practices that combat, at the root, the narrative of failure that paralyzes so many at the end of each year. They operate at the intersection of reflection and action, between awareness and movement. But even with all this, there is a final trap, perhaps the most dangerous of all. It is the silent belief that it is already too late, that the year is over, that there is no more time to reverse anything. This belief is the last bastion of the fixed mindset and needs to be destroyed now before it turns into a prophecy. In the next section, we will confront this illusion head-on. We will understand why true failure is not making mistakes, but rather going through an entire year without extracting anything from it. And most importantly, why the simple fact that you are here, watching and reflecting, is already a sign that 2025 can be rewritten, even if there is only 1 month left on the calendar. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. There is a type of failure that is silent, invisible, and much more dangerous than any apparent defeat. It is not the failure of those who tried and did not succeed. It is not the failure of those who got hurt in the process of growing. It is the failure of those who go through an entire cycle, a whole year, and come out the other side exactly the same, without new questions, without new strategies, without new learnings. This is the true failure, to go through pain and learn absolutely nothing from it. And here lies the great trap. Many people believe they failed in 2025 because they did not reach where they wanted. But that, in itself, is not a failure. That is life. Frustrated expectations, projects that do not take off, goals that turn out to be poorly calculated. All of this is part of any real journey. It is not the detour that destroys you. It is your inability to extract meaning from what went wrong. That is what defines whether the year was lost, or if it was the most important of your journey. Carol Dweck makes this clear. The mistake is not the failure itself. It is the refusal to explore it with honesty and curiosity. When you fail, but investigate, learn, adapt, you evolve. When you fail and only blame yourself or ignore it, you simply repeat. And repeating failures without learning does not strengthen you. It hardens you. It embitters you. It turns you into someone who carries the past as a burden, not as a foundation for building. And here is what almost no one tells you. You may have learned deep and valuable things in 2025, but because they came through failure, you simply ignored them. Our culture is so obsessed with visible results that we cannot recognize when growth comes disguised as crisis. You may have developed patience. You may have learned to deal with frustration. You may have discovered emotional limits you never noticed before. You may have strengthened relationships by going through difficulties, and all of this counts. But it only counts if it is recognized. Notice, the simple fact that you are watching this video already proves that you have not completely failed, because someone who truly failed does not seek to understand what happened, does not look for explanations, is not interested in turning pain into insight. The fact that you are here means that there is a part of you, perhaps small, perhaps exhausted, that still believes in the possibility of rewriting the story of 2025. And the good news is, you still have time. We are not in January. We are not looking at the past as something untouchable. We are in November. There are still days, weeks, moments. There is still space for a conscious action, a powerful decision, a significant change. There is still time to transform 2025 from a lost year to a foundational year. But this requires one last step, the most important of all. It is the point where everything we have talked about so far, mindset, techniques, learning, needs to turn into movement. It is time to act, and we are not talking about giant plans, but about micro-actions, prototypes, rehearsals of a new version of yourself. In the next and final section, you will understand why there is still time to turn this game around. Not to make 2025 the perfect year, but to make it the year where everything started to change. And that depends on one thing: what you will choose to do from now on. You are still here. That means that despite the weight of 2025, Despite the feeling of stagnation, the frustration with everything that hasn't happened, you are still searching for meaning. And that, in itself, places you in a rare group of people. Most people shut down, they distract themselves, they pretend not to care. But you stayed. You are facing the pain, questioning the narrative, seeking a new path. And that's exactly why this moment may be the most important of your entire year. Carol Dweck didn't write about mindset just to inspire. She wrote to liberate, to free you from the belief that your worth depends on achieved goals, perfect results, a flawless timeline. To free you from the idea that what went wrong in 2025 is proof of who you are. Because it's not. The only real proof is here now. You want to grow. And that changes everything. The transformation you seek won't happen all at once. It won't come in a magical insight or a 12-step plan. It starts small. It begins when you choose to look back with new eyes. It starts when you take an hour out of your day to do that honest audit. When you open a notebook and write down your learnings, even if it hurts. When you send that message you've been avoiding. When you try again with a different approach. When you stop waiting for January to fix your life and start fixing it now, even without guarantees, even in November. That's what people with a growth mindset do. They don't wait for conditions to be ideal. They create traction in chaos. They make micro versions of the life they want to live, even amidst fatigue, doubt, and noise. And little by little, they rewrite the script. 2025 is not lost. 2025 is not over yet. And even if it has been the hardest year of your life, it can still become the most important year. The year you decided to stop carrying your failures as weights and started using them as tools. So here's the challenge. Stop now and write in the comments a sentence that defines what 2025 has taught you. Just that. One sentence. This is your first step of rewriting. By putting this out there, you stop being a prisoner of the failure narrative and start building a new one. And if this video helped you think differently, share it with someone who also needs to escape their own mental prison. Maybe you are exactly the trigger for change that this person has been waiting for. And before you go, watch the next video. It's essential. The journey you started here doesn't end now. It's just beginning. And the next step is as important as this one. You've already made the first move. Keep going.